I got better things to do than die tonight.
Hello and welcome to the Swedish Transformers podcast. I am Linda, the loyal Autobot.
And I am Gustav, the deceptive Decepticon.
And I'm Brian, the current writer on IDW Transformers. So I should probably try and stay a bit neutral.
Welcome to the podcast, Brian.
Thank you.
I have a little bit of background here. So you wrote mostly about fantasy and you're an author to the Godless World trilogy.
That was the first, my first 3 books were a trilogy called The Godless World, yeah.
Mm. And you started to work with IDW in 2013 for the reboot of Rogue Trooper, and then Highlander, and then finally 2019 the Transformers: A Bold New Era.
Yes, not my idea, the A Bold New Era thing, but yes.
And also now a miniseries, The Escape.
Yes, I did. I lose track of these things, but I think we're currently partway through Escape as a sort of mini series running in parallel to the main Transformers series.
Yeah. Also, Wikipedia says that you have a hard time to write about Soundwave. Why is that? My first question.
I'll bet I know why that's there. I didn't realize that was on Wikipedia. I think I said something along those lines at the TF Nation convention I was at in too long ago now. Yeah, I'm kind of over that, to be honest. I've sort of come to terms with how I've decided to write Soundwave and how I approach it, sort of thing. Because like with all these things, it's more about some characters right from the start. You've got a very clear idea of the voice and exactly what, is behind it and all that kind of thing. And I think with Soundwave, it was more a matter of sort of navigating the distance between what I felt like doing with him and how I wanted to present him and how he's usually presented and how he appears in other media. So trying to sort of thread a path through there just took me a while to figure out. But I think I've made my peace with Soundwave these days.
Yeah.
So you just had a rough start with him.
Yeah, well, just getting a handle on him. It's always when you start writing any of these characters, to be honest, quite often it takes you a bit of time, even if you think you're starting off with a very clear idea, it takes you a little bit of time to figure out exactly how you're going to do it on the page, sort of thing.
Gustav, take it.
Yes. I will try to bring more of the Transformers-related questions. And I'm sorry if these are the questions you have heard 1,000 times.
That's all right.
We'll try to surprise you with something, maybe. But first things first. Are you a Decepticon or are you an Autobot fan?
That's never really a fair question to ask a writer who's sort of in the middle of working on it, because I'm a fan of whoever I'm writing at the moment, sort of thing. Whatever, actually today I was doing outlines and stuff rather than scripts, but if you're in the middle of a script or something, you'd better be a fan of whoever you're writing at that moment, or it's probably not going to be working that well. I mean, in big picture terms, I suppose I've got to say I'm an Autobot, because certainly the way I'm writing them, they're the goodies. And, the Decepticons are, they certainly end up as baddies the way I write them. So I'll go Autobot.
You're not the first to write them like that.
No, absolutely.
But if you were a Transformer character yourself, who would it be?
Oh, well, I can think of 2 or 3 different answers to that, depending on how you come at it. If it was purely a question of who I would quite like to be, and in a purely selfish sort of way of being mostly interested in how cool an alt mode I could get out of it, I would probably want to be Springer, or certainly no less than a triple changer, maybe up to 6-shot or one of the 6 changes or something, just to maximize the amount of flexibility you've got. Plus, Springer's obviously got a helicopter mode, and I've always thought that helicopters were kind of the coolest Transformers in a way. But that said, if I was actually the ones I feel sort of most connected to, or have the most sort of, if there was a version of me showing up in there as one of the characters, the ones I've kind of got the most empathy or instinctive connection with are probably the sort of the slightly nerdy pacifist types. Like, well, the way I do it in my series, it's characters like Nautica and Wheeljack and people like this who always, it's not that I'm writing them as me, but you know, I can see more of me in characters like Nautica than I unfortunately can in characters like Springer, who are a bit better at the hand-to-hand combat than I'll ever be.
Yeah.
Yeah, the alt mode is always a fascinating choice.
Yeah, well, you've got to think about these things.
Yeah, of course. So, the Transformers, how did it all get started for you? How did you get introduced to the franchise from the start?
Well, I'm not what you would call a sort of serious old school fan or anything like that. So when I was growing up, I was obviously aware of them. And, you know, over the years, I saw bits and pieces of, well, various of the cartoons, and read, you know, a comic here and there back when Marvel were doing them and all that sort of thing. But to be honest, back in those days, certainly as far as comics were concerned, I was much more on a superhero kick. So I wasn't really immersed in the whole Transformers thing back then. And it probably wasn't until whenever I can't actually remember the dates, but whenever things like the Prime cartoon, and I think it's the second version of Transformers animated, the one that had the B team with Bumblebee and Sideswipe and Strongarm in it, I got a bit more clued into it then and was paying quite a bit of attention. And obviously the live action movies raise the profile of it all, so you become even more aware of it. But I was quite into what I saw of the Prime cartoon. And then the thing that really did it was the IDW Transformers comics, which I read a bunch of. And I mean, I would say this, wouldn't I, since they're paying my wages at the moment, but I thought they were some of the best licensed comics I'd ever read. I mean, I'd literally sort of, out of all the licensed comics that have ever been produced, I think some of their Transformers stuff was just incredibly good comics, let alone good Transformers stories. So I got very interested in the whole franchise then, but ended up actually writing the comics purely by chance, really. I didn't put myself forward for it or anything. I was just contacted and invited to pitch, sort of thing.
How do you get this by chance? It sounds intriguing.
Everyone, you know, loads of people love the idea of writing comics and stuff, and people often ask you how you get into writing comics, whether it's Transformers or anything else. And the truth is, it's almost impossible to give an answer to that that's, generally applicable. So, I mean, I wound up writing comics by writing a bunch of novels, and just getting lucky that one of the editors at IDW was a fan of my novels and asked me, got in touch, kind of sent me a fan email basically, and just asked at the end whether or not I'd ever thought about writing comics. And one thing led to another, and that's how I ended up writing Rogue Trooper and Highlander, and then eventually Transformers for IDW.
Did you have to think twice about answering yes?
Oh, not to any of them, no. I mean, the Rogue Trooper one, I grew up with. I don't know if you know the British comic 2000 AD, which is a science fiction anthology comic, which is where Rogue Trooper comes from. So I was a huge fan of that. And the idea of getting invited to do some comics on that was a no-brainer sort of thing. And a bit the same with Highlander. That's just a cool property that I know quite well. And Transformers, as I say, I was a huge fan of what IDW had done with Transformers in comics, and with some of the other media in the franchise. So, you know, it's a bit intimidating to take these things on, but you know, I am in theory a professional writer, so you say yes when the opportunity comes.
I have a quick question also, like, do you think there's any possibility for you to ever write a novel about Transformers?
That's a good question. Because people have done that, obviously. I would have thought, I mean, it's partly because of my background with the franchise and my history with it. There's so much about the franchise that is intensely visual. You know, half the appeal is these beautifully visually designed characters changing and becoming vehicles, and all the colors and all this sort of thing. So, you know, I personally would slightly struggle, I suspect, to do that in prose style, which isn't to say it can't be done, obviously, because people have done it quite successfully. But I just personally associate the whole Transformers universe so strongly with kind of visuals, that it's hard to get your head sort of switched into another approach.
Yeah.
And you're currently writing the bold new era for the Transformers. That is a reboot. Was that your idea, or how did it come to be a reboot?
No, that was, you know, never quite sure how much to get into the question of how the sausage is made in this kind of situation. That was completely out of the blue. I was actually, the way it originally started was somebody at IDW just asked me whether I had any interest in the Transformers, and I said yes, because I was reading and enjoying the comics and all that. And I thought if there was a pitch coming out of it, it was going to be some mini-series or one-shot or something. But then it came through from IDW, and Hasbro had clearly decided that they were going to start more or less from a clean slate and just build everything back up from the ground up in a different way. And I think, I really don't know, so I don't have any special knowledge of the background to it. I mean, it may have had something to do with the fact that the Worf Cybertron toy lines and cartoons were in the pipeline, obviously. And certainly there were parameters. It actually took quite a long iterative step-by-step process, starting from the initial pitch to actually unearth what the parameters were of what the new series could be, and just how much of a free hand we did or didn't have to actually sort of go wild or anything like that. But it was certainly influenced to some extent, as things came together, by the upcoming toy lines and all this sort of thing, which is as you'd expect it to be, of course, for comics that theoretically anyway exist to sell toys and so on.
Yes. How much freedom do you have to develop the story?
Well, it's again, that's been a process of discovery as we've gone along, shall I say. Certainly when we were in the very early stages, all the discussions were very open-ended, and it got a bit more. I think it would be fair to say that Hasbro were paying quite close attention as things developed over the first year or 18 months or whatever, and there was quite intensive sort of notes and discussions coming back, trying to not so much actually, funnily enough, sort of influence the stories we were telling, but a lot of it was about just trying to maintain some degree of not continuity but consistency and sort of feel of relatedness with the cartoons and other media and so on. So there were instances, obviously, where there were things we thought we might be doing when we first started that we couldn't, and just on a really basic level, I would sometimes suggest doing something with one of the characters and there'd be a slight sort of no, maybe not, that doesn't quite fit, let's find another character and all this kind of thing, which is absolutely fine. I mean, that's 100%. You'd better know that's the deal you're making if you're going to get involved in writing anything in the licensed comic area, because obviously it's not my property, it's not IDW's property, so there's absolutely no problem with that. But certainly recently it's all been going very smoothly, to be honest, which is partly, I'm sure, just sort of me and IDW and Hasbro all sort of figuring each other out and sort of knowing where the boundaries are and so on. And nowadays I'm getting away with doing things that I didn't think I would not so long ago. So it's been remarkably smooth, really.
I'm gonna kick in with some questions here. So is the Bold New Era inspired by any historical event or hinting at something like that?
In the real world?
On Earth.
On Earth. That terrible planet called Earth. No, it's not by anything specific. There are elements within it that have been kind of loosely inspired by specific events or movements or whatever in Earth history, but they're really quite randomly distributed. So I'm not trying to replicate any sort of or make any statement about anything specific on Earth, really. It's more a bit like I'm just pecking around in Earth history and current affairs and stuff and picking out little bits that I like and that seem like they might fit in the story, see it here and there. So I do slightly silly things, like I've had Megatron quoting Oliver Cromwell, who's a big figure from 17th century English history, and I've had I think I had Optimus Prime quoting a speech from John F. Kennedy at one point. So I lift little details like that here and there, and some of the themes about what it takes to drive a basically peaceful society into breaking apart and setting about trying to kill each other. Obviously there are inevitable connections to stuff that us humans have got up to and are getting up to, but it's not intended as a specific correlation, really.
I recognize you some small bits too that seem to be like something that happened here, like the Depression in United States. I think when they weren't allowed to drink alcohol and stuff like that because
Yeah,
of the war and stuff like that. Because what I understood, I've read this comic almost fully. They had already been in a war and they're talking about it, and now suddenly they're in a war again, and most of these characters aren't even familiar with war
yeah.
or
I mean,
fighting or even seeing death.
that was certainly the sort of basic idea I had in from even from the very start of the pitching, was that it was going to be a I mean, I think actually IDW and Hasbro asked for this originally anyway, that they wanted a peaceful, kind of pleasant, successful Cybertron, and they wanted to start there. So I just took that and said, right, well, we'll put another big war in there, sort of distance-ish, but relatively recent past, that's basically traumatized the society so much that they've kind of enforced peace, and they've adapted and constrained their society in all sorts of ways to try and preserve peace, because they're so horrified by what happened before. And then you get the constraints they've put in to preserve the peace end up kind of building up enough tension that they trigger this new war that, yeah, I think we say somewhere in the series that most of the Cybertronians alive at the time that I'm writing don't remember the previous war. They just, they know that it was terrible and all this.
Yeah. And they aren't even used to see death. So whenever someone dies, a new one comes up, and everyone knows that. Huge pressure on the new guy.
Yeah, I know, it's quite a big deal. But I've always thought, I think that's one of the, I mean, it obviously all this stuff gets explored all the time in Transformers stuff, but the whole thing of them living such incredibly long lifetimes, being made out of, semi-indestructible metal and stuff, the whole notion of their relationship with birth and death, and how comfortable or otherwise they are with these things, and how they actually think about living, especially in comparison to all these very brief, soft-bodied organic creatures who are around them in the universe. I always think that's something that's kind of intriguing about the Transformers.
Oh yeah, I just remembered one part that is actually one of my favorite parts. I'm sorry, Gustav, I'm just going for it right now. I think it's a huge tower that falls over.
The tether, yes.
Yeah, it's almost like
the cable that connected the winged moon to Cybertron. That's right.
Yeah. Feels like it's almost as if it's their 9/11. It's like the most catastrophic thing in a long time.
Tis a bit, yeah. I mean, I didn't actually have 9/11 in mind specifically when I was writing that, but it's not a bad analogy, because it is there to be kind of the defining event that suddenly kind of switches a lot of people's attitudes to what's happening, and kind of makes them, sort of shakes them awake, and makes them realize that what's happening is actually, this is getting quite serious now.
Yeah,
sort of
a
thing.
Real threat. Yeah. Yeah, it was a real awakening in the story, because it's also quite it takes a long time to build up. And I heard that some people say that it's boring in the beginning, but I'm like, we already had the action. We had so many action in the Transformers in these comic books, and I'm just happy that for once we have a story that actually takes its time to introduce the characters and the peaceful world and all of its glory and the characters before the shit hits the fan.
Well, that's good if it worked for you. I mean, I must admit, I've got some sympathy with people who sort of think the pacing is a bit off, and that we didn't quite get it right, especially early on. I mean, to be honest, this isn't true of all writers by any means, but most of the professional writers I know who've been at it for a while are harsher critics of their own work than the vast majority of readers will ever be, because we do tend to be acutely aware of what could have been done better and all this sort of thing. But to be fair, we certainly with some situations, you tend to be a bit more forgiving of yourself than readers are, because you know the circumstances in which the sausage got made, as I said earlier. So I think I did slightly misjudge the pacing early on, but at the same time, I think what we were trying to do was a good thing to try to do, which was exactly as you say, build up this vision of a peaceful world that had a lot to recommend it in a lot of ways, and then gradually build up to the point where, you know, everything started falling down. So there is a reasonable rationale behind it, I think, and it clearly works for some people. But I'd be the last person to say, you know, anything I ever wrote was flawless or anything like that.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I know they work behind that. You are your own worst critic or hardest critic.
I think it's very often true. I mean, I always. I think the most sensible thing you can ever say to any, actual or aspiring writer or artist is to always try to remember that you're nothing like as bad as the people who say you're terrible really are, but you're also nothing like as good as the people who say you're the best thing ever are.
Yeah.
Almost certainly. And you have to, you know, if you're going to make a career out of it, certainly you have to just cultivate the ability to try and have a sort of internal objective judgment of what's working and what's not wherever you can.
Yeah, and a lot of these critics that I've seen on YouTube and whatever, not a lot of them has been writing comics before. So I think it's
no.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
a huge job.
Well, it is, but I would I mean, to be honest, writing comics is easier than writing novels. The only difference with comics that makes it kind of challenging is the timescale you're operating on, and, you know, the number of the number of moving parts and sort of layers of editorial oversight and stuff. So it is a complex business, certainly. But it's also, I've got to say, it's also nowadays, certainly it's my favorite kind of writing. I find it on a day-to-day basis so much more enjoyable than writing a sort of crazy long fantasy novel like I started out, just because there's so much more interaction and you get such more rapid feedback, and you get these fantastic artists sort of sending pictures of work in progress and all this kind of thing, and it's like being a fan.
Yeah. Speaking of
I have to say that I like the slower paced work, because I like the world building. Always when something is coming to an end, it feels rushed. The tempo feels like, oh, we have to quit it.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, you know, as I say, it was a deliberate choice by me and by other people involved. And, you know, we've had very good feedback from lots of people enjoying it purely for what it is and what it was intended to be. So it's 100%, you know, not everything you write is ever going to be for everybody. And what you're looking for is to find the audience who enjoy it.
Speaking of artists, is there any particular artist you like to work with?
Well, all of them is the honest answer, because I I am barely at the stick figure level of artistic achievement myself. So anytime an artist does anything that brings something I've written to life, I'm kind of in awe of it. I mean, I think it's one of my absolute favorite things about the whole series has been seeing artists like Anna Malkova and Beth McGuire-Smith coming in from essentially coming in from the fandom and just becoming these tremendously accomplished professional comics artists incredibly quickly. I mean, you know, I was saying writing comics has its own challenges compared to writing prose, but illustrating sequential comics is so much harder than sort of creating a standalone beautiful image of a Transformer or something like that. There's so much more goes into good sequential comic art that I'm just in awe of these people who can do it, and seeing them get better issue by issue and sort of really blossoming into seasoned prose is amazing. But I would also, being a fan of past IDW Transformers comics, I've seen that we've got, I think it'll probably be out within a few weeks of this going out. We've got an annual, the 2021 annual coming out, which I wrote and which is illustrated by Alex Milne, who's kind of, you know, that's me being a fan, seeing an artist I've read writing drawing Transformers for a long time, just doing amazing work on the annual. So it's all good. I think they're all amazing.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we had Alex Milne on a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Great guy.
He's an amazing artist. I don't know how he does the detail he does. It's quite incredible.
I'm sometimes wondering if he sold his soul to something.
Well, exactly.
My God, Gustav, get a new chair.
his chair's transforming.
Second.
Exactly. Well, any favorite Transformers character you like to write about?
I must really get a new chair.
Is your internet okay? I think he's having some
gone
issues.
into time.
Yeah, he's going into time. Okay, let's go back. Any favorite Transformers character you like to write about, or all the characters equal for you?
I do. It sounds a terrible sort of writery thing to say, that I do have to try and find something to like in writing every character that I'm actually writing, because otherwise they'll kind of just fall dead on the page, sort of thing. And I do put quite a lot of effort into, even for sort of minor characters, just having some kind of distinctive thing about them that comes across in their dialogue or behavior, even if they're only there for a page or two. But it is true, I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but it is true that the baddies are often the most fun to write. Just because it tends to be kind of easier just to really, you know, push them a bit further and get a bit carried away and go a bit too far with them. So it's always fun doing people like Megatron, and I actually really like writing Soundwave nowadays because I've developed this particular way of writing him, and Starscream and people like that. But as I say, I do love the slightly nerdy, engineering, sciencey types like Wheeljack and Nautica, and all these kinds of people. And it is the case that before, a lot of these, I've developed enormous affection for some of the characters beyond anything I had before by writing them. So I've kind of written my way into an enormous attachment to Wheeljack that, you know, I always quite liked him just from a design and basic personality point of view. But I kind of I spend half my time trying to think of reasons to insert him into the comic more often, just because I like writing him so much now.
Yeah. Nice. Gustav, please take it.
Yes. I will try to take a few more Transformers questions.
Big surprise.
Big surprise. You said you had problem writing Soundwave, but what characters are your go-to characters? Who's easy to write about?
So the easiest character to write is always the character that is clearest in your head. The entire, I'm sure it's the same with art, but the entire writing process is this compromise between this just perfect inspired vision that's in your head and the complete mess that you actually put down on the page in trying to translate that vision into existence, sort of thing. So, you know, the whole process is trying to get something of the sort of nebulous sense, perfect sense you have in your head of how this character should be down on the page. And the most enjoyable to write are always the ones where that kind of flow from your head to the page comes most easily. And it's usually the ones who have a relatively simple, clear, but sort of, this is sounding very writery. They've got a simple-ish hook that you're basing their character on, but there's room to play with it and develop it and kind of decorate it around the edges. So for me, it has been characters like Wheeljack, and Sideswipe, for whatever reason, comes quite naturally to me just because I had a very clear sense of his voice and personality. And I do I do like writing Megatron. I mean, it's it's not necessarily all revealed on the page, but at least in my head, I've got quite a clear idea about why Megatron is the way he is, where he's coming from, you know, all sorts of stuff that may never even get revealed about his backstory and all this that's led him to the point where he's willing to blow everything up, basically, and sort of slide into darkness. So when you've got that much behind your conception of a character, not always, but it tends to be relatively straightforward in terms of writing them on a page-to-page basis.
I was also wondering, sorry, Gustav, I'm cutting in here again. When we have these both sides, Optimus Prime and Megatron, and their politic opinion, which side were you standing on before the shit hit the...
Sorry. I'm just debating whether I should answer that. No, I don't think I will. I deliberately, I mean, I've done this in most of whatever I've written in any medium, to be honest. It goes back to what I was saying before. You have to have some kind of sympathy and engagement with any character you write in order to write them convincingly a lot of the time. And I have once or twice not in comics, but well, actually, no, I did in comics once or twice. I have written just straightforward, you know, just psychopathic, clearly bad, evil characters. But most of what I write, and in Transformers, I look for at least trying to convey to the reader that what this character is doing might be ridiculous and evil, but in that character's mind, and in their background there are reasons, they have just self-justification for it. So in terms of the situation before the war breaks out, all I'd say is the world was imperfect, but it was a really pretty good effort at a sort of approximately equal, peaceful, relatively prosperous society. But it obviously there were flaws with it and there were mistakes. But whether those mistakes and flaws justify the extremes the Decepticons end up going to, readers can decide for themselves.
Yeah.
I've probably basically said which side I'm on there, even though I said I wasn't going to.
It's okay. I mean, I really liked how Megatron was telling it, because they are desperate, they are hungry and stuff like that. Like, just because you steal a car doesn't mean that the person is a evil person. It's just that desperate people do desperate things.
Yeah. I've actually somewhere I've got a list of the 7 reasons, I think it's 7, it's either 7 or 9, why someone would be a Decepticon in this world. I won't tell you what it is, because I think I originally thought of it as a might have been gonna use it in dialogue at some point. Maybe I will. So I better not tell you exactly what it is. But basically, I had a list of 9 reasons that a character could just go bang, bang, bang. These are the reasons why someone might be a Decepticon, and it went from things like being deranged to being bored to I can't remember what the most reasonable one on there was, but there was some, it goes right to fairly reasonable reasons. So there's to my mind, there was a whole range of reasons that a character might use in their own head, or that might just flow from their personality, why they could end up siding with Megatron. I mean, my personal take on Megatron is kind of complicated, but it basically boils down to he's just frustrated.
Yeah.
In all sorts of different ways, for reasons both good and bad, and on all sorts of kind of shallow and profound psychological levels. He's just frustrated.
Yeah.
He's not evil for evil's sake. He
No.
just went a little too far.
He's getting there, though. Some of this, I mean, the whole idea, obviously, with him, well, it's probably obvious in the series by now, is that he's going to end up in a pretty dark place.
Yeah.
Talking of dark places where Transformers go, Rubble, the little child robot, first appears in the bold new era. Can you tell us a little about that little Transformer?
So he's got a complicated backstory, actually, or not literal character backstory, but his origin. When the very first pitch I put into IDW for the whole series was unrecognizably different to what we ended up with once all the various stages had been gone through, but it included a human being on Cybertron, because that was one of the suggested hooks. And the idea behind that was to have, it's fairly trite mechanical story building. The idea was to have a viewpoint character for the reader who you could introduce the world through. So have someone who's experiencing the world afresh, as it were. And then it evolved and it became the idea of having a newborn Transformer as the viewpoint character that could be used to introduce the world to the readers, to him at the same time. And then it evolved to a request to have Bumblebee relatively prominent early in the series. So Bumblebee I came up with this idea of mentors, the kind of not exactly parental, but this relationship that the newly forged Transformers have with a guide, a mentor. And then it became, sadly, Rubble dying relatively early on in the series, for, you know, various plot reasons and so on. And I suspect some readers weren't terribly happy with that, but, you know, that's in some ways that's a sign of effective writing or plotting or something to create that degree of engagement and loss. And I have to say, I didn't actually like writing that particular sequence and plot development, but you know, you're on the train at a certain point, so.
Yeah, I got really surprised.
Interesting take.
I got also really surprised when he actually died, because I felt like, no, Rubble's not gonna die, it's gonna all be happy and stuff like that. But when he actually died, I was like, I didn't like it, but I know why it was there. I accept it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all I can ask for.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it deserves much more than that.
Is it
he played his part.
Yeah, he did. I think it's RC, right? She also has her student.
Yes, Gage, yes.
Gage, yeah, and I love how she's protecting her, and she's more to the mother, it feels like. She gets pissed when Gage got shot by a rubber bullet or something.
Yeah.
And I really like her personality there. I'm like, a raging woman.
Yeah, she's well, she appeared in the Galaxies series, the Galaxy series that was running alongside this one, but she's I was just actually outlining this afternoon sort of future issues in which RC and Greenlight and Gage will be coming back into the main storyline.
Yeah. It was real fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you had a choice, damn Hasbro in this particular matter, they don't have a choice, you have to choose. One character you can kill off and one you have to, one you can save.
Good grief. I'm just mentally going through the list of characters I've got noted down somewhere in my notes as potentially meeting unfortunate ends at some point. I'll tell you. Well, all right. I would never be allowed to do this in a million years. Well, no, I say that. No, I mean, they've done it before, so they might. But to actually permanently kill Megatron and see what that did to the remaining Decepticon characters would be quite fun, I think. I mean, it would be the kiss of death in terms of fan engagement and sales, I suspect. But I have deliberately got it sort of set up in the series that all Megatron's lieutenants are sort of pretty capable, actually, and quite smart and cunning and everything, but functionally incapable of working together in any really effective way. So actually sort of decapitating the regime and removing Megatron from the picture entirely and seeing what happened would be quite entertaining. In terms of saving characters, to be honest, the characters I would probably, there's loads of characters in the series that I would fight tooth and nail to keep alive under whatever circumstances. The ones I would absolutely go to the wall for are probably, if I had to choose, I would keep Nautica and Road Rage, just because I quite like them as a sort of duo, Batman and Robin type thing or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excuse me, Linda, I have to put it in there, but maybe it will happen. Probably not. Why don't you put Dinobot Slash in the comic book? Just a panel somewhere, background.
Okay, well, I will. I'm pretty sure Slash is somewhere on my list. I obviously have a list. The truth is, once we reached a stage in the editorial process where I realized I had a good deal of flexibility in certain areas, there were two things I decided to go sort of fully commit to, one of which was getting every female character I could justify in the comic from whatever continuity. And the other was just kind of approaching the entire universe of Transformers characters as if there are clearly certain ones I had to use. That was a requirement. But once you got past the real big stars who I had to have in there, approach all the rest of the characters as if none of them were ever any more famous than any of the others, and just go back to first principles and pick characters I liked rather than ones that had traditionally high-profile roles, which is how you've ended up with some of the slightly obscure characters who show up in the series. There's no reason why Slash can't be part of that. I mean, to be honest, I think I've probably pushed it as far as I can go, so I'm kind of not introducing too many more new characters at this point. But yeah, I'll revisit my list.
Great, she needs some love.
Yeah.
She is. I mean, she genuinely is on my list because I think she's a very nice design. I think she's a good-looking character.
Yeah. Should we leave the Transformers a little bit and come back? Wildlife enthusiast you are, and you also have a podcast on it, the Wild Episode.
I do, yes. Is that on Wikipedia as well?
Yeah.
And your website.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. I think my website's gone down, actually. But
no, I was on it just the other week.
Oh, yeah? Oh, okay. Yeah, there's a podcast website for the podcast, certainly.
Yes. They say this has clearly influenced your work on Transformers. How has it done so? Is it more organic, or was it?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true. I did, before I was a writer, I worked in nature conservation and environmental sort of related fields. So I'm various kinds of a nerd and a geek, but I'm definitely a nature geek. And it did feed into the Transformers stuff to some extent, in that, you know, I have seeded a certain amount of wildlife, non-metallic wildlife on Cybertron and all this sort of thing. And, you know, it influences some of the stuff I've done with alien species and all that kind of thing. But it's not, I deliberately try to keep it sort of relatively in check and in the background as kind of world building elements, rather than sort of giving full rein to my environmental biases in the sort of surface text or anything like that.
There is some flowers and stuff you can take from the G1 cartoon. There's an episode of metallic flowers that eat Transformer or something.
Oh yeah.
Morphobots,
that's it.
Yeah, the fact that I know that name might tell you that you're suggesting something that might be in the pipeline.
Oh, great.
Also, I think that there was a pterodactyl also in the comic. A flying dinosaur.
Kind of, yeah, I called them skitters.
Skitters. Are they from Earth? Is that one from Earth?
No.
It's an alien.
Yeah, they're all aliens. I'm pretty sure this is true. There's no indication in the series anywhere that whatever's going on Earth, anyone anywhere in the universe has ever heard of a place called Earth.
Okay.
So we haven't specified sort of time periods or anything, but as far as I'm concerned, at the moment, Earth is a probably pre-human backwater somewhere off in the corner of the galaxy.
Yeah.
More than 4 million years ago, then.
Yeah, don't get me started on that.
Sorry.
I love Transformers lore and everything. I really struggle with the 4 million year war thing. But anyway, we'll gloss over that.
Yeah. Looking to the future, will there be any holiday-themed special issues? We had Valentine special of a year or so ago. Will there be like a Christmas story or something?
Not that I'm aware of, or that's on my writing horizon. We're doing the annual, as I said, which is out in a month or so. And there are... I've no idea what's been announced and what hasn't, to be honest. But there are various Transformers things in the pipeline, some of which may well be directly associated with this series and this universe. Others may not. I don't know about Christmas. I'm not sure that's been discussed. I can suggest it if you'd particularly like a Christmas special of some sort.
We love the Christmas special from the past. We need news.
Yeah.
What's announced right now is Shattered Glass, mini story, and King Grimlock.
Yes, okay. I think there might be one or two other things coming down the pipeline. But yeah, I don't think Christmas is on the agenda at the moment. But as I say, I'll put in a word for you.
It's always next year.
Yeah.
Do you have anything more, Linda?
No, I think that was it.
Then we will let our previous guest have a go at you.
Yeah.
And our previous guest was who, Linda? I have so many
names.
guests.
I don't like names. I always forget names. I know who he is, but I forget the name. Andrew Griff. I just cut that out.
No, you will not.
I will not. You never cut out my mistakes, Gustav.
Andrew Griffith will ask you this question now.
Oh, go on then.
Hey, Brian. Andrew here. So one question I would have for you is, when you started the new iteration or the new relaunch of Transformers, there's so many characters that fans just love before, from anyone from like Thundercracker to Cyclonus or anybody from like More Than Meets the Eye, they just love. So, and the different relationships that were established. So how much pressure did you feel, or how much concern did you have about putting your own takes on these characters and like maybe forming new relations or handling characters in a different way for the new relaunch? Was that something that you had to think about a lot, or was that you found challenging?
Was that challenging?
That's oh dear. I don't approve of this, getting people who know how the system works and everything asking tricky questions. Okay, so there's various things in there. Yes, I was acutely aware when I got the gig that we were coming in on the back of a universe and particular series in the previous version of the IDW Transformers universe that people dearly loved and that were very important to them. I was also aware that we weren't going to be in a position to necessarily replicate everything that people particularly made a connection with in that series, not on the same, not, you know, the idea was to start with a clean slate. It was never going to be a continuation of what had gone before. And I mean, the truth is, a lot of what was written in, especially More Than Meets the Eye and Lost Light, I could not write those characters in that way any better or even nearly as well as had already been done by James Roberts. So I did quite consciously not try to... this is a bit complicated because there were certainly, particularly early on, you know, there were some restrictions on which characters we could use freely and so on. But I did try to steer clear of quite a lot of characters from that previous IDW universe, partly because I didn't think I could do any better with them, and partly because I didn't really want to sort of undercut anything that had been done with them in that previous series by coming up with some other, you know, potentially not as good interpretation of the character. There are exceptions to that, and you know, there are one or two characters I've carried over, like Cyclonus is the one that springs to mind, who I loved in the previous IDW universe, and I couldn't bring myself not to do something with him and bring him in and try and find something, you know, my own version of something to do with him. So I did tread a bit carefully, but I indulged myself here and there. But you know, the deal was come in and do something different that is your own rather than pick up what went before. So that's what I did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you have any contact with the previous writer, James Roberts, when you did this?
Not until I'd already started doing it. I mean, I've spoken to him since, I've met him since then. And you know, had some contact with him, but not until oh, I can't remember exactly, but we were, you know, not until after we'd started publishing the new issues. I think generally comics writers in particular are really good about not, unless they're invited, they tend not to kind of try and stay too involved in a franchise or a character or something after they have left it on the whole, because, you know, they understand how the system works and stuff.
Mm.
They've seen things, heard things.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great, you know, when there were a few of us at a table at the just before conventions got cancelled because of COVID. And it is nice to be able to, you know, share behind the scenes war stories or whatever with people who've been through it all.
Oh yeah, Gustav, the question where, let's see, did we have that? The nightmare. Do you have any nightmare projects about Transformers?
Something you found hard or was a terrible experience or something?
Not about Transformers, to be honest. No, it's been a joy, really. I'll give you another comics one if you like, which was the very first comic I wrote, which is Rogue Trooper, obviously, as I said before, was I pitched for it, obviously, and signed on to do it as a kind of, I don't think anyone thought it would go on for particularly long, but as an open-ended series, basically, with no defined limit. And it was cancelled before the first issue had shipped. So I only ever got to do 4 issues of it. And I really liked it, and I love the character, so I could quite happily have done a lot more. But it was, and I'm very happy with what we did. But it was a bit distressing to be putting out a comic that got cancelled before the first issue even hit the shops.
Yeah.
That's
But
terrible.
That's just the way these things go.
Going back to the Transformers then, with the same question you just told me. How many issues were you granted to try this bold new era from the start?
Oh, there's no
like the first arc will be 10 issues, or?
Well, it was suggested. I don't think it was what you would call an editorial instruction or whatever. It was suggested by IDW that I start off doing it as 5-issue arcs with a standalone story every 6th issue. So that's why you got these issues on 6, 12, 18, 24 that were kind of somewhat self-contained and focused on individual characters a bit more. So that kind of structure was set for me. And I don't know, they wouldn't necessarily tell me, I don't suppose, but as far as IDW and Hasbro were concerned, it was open-ended, and we were just going to go for as long as we all wanted and were happy to keep going, kind of thing. And it's become a bit more freeform in terms of structure now, in that we've dropped that structure of having strict 5-issue arcs and standalone 6 issues. So it's slightly more freeform, and I'm messing about a bit more with shorter sort of story arcs and mixing it up a bit more now. But yeah, I mean, in terms of overall length, we'll keep going until somebody tells us to stop, I guess.
What has been your favorite arc so far in the bold new era?
Favorite arc. I don't know that I've got a favorite arc, to be honest. I think it's back to this thing I said earlier, that all writing is a compromise between the sort of the vision of sheer genius that's in your head and the sort of garbled version of it that you end up managing to actually get down on paper, which always falls short in some respects. But the bigger the scale, the harder it is to really nail what you were going for. So I think the biggest scale I would claim to have really hit the intended target is probably about individual issues. So there's quite a few issues where I think, for better or worse, because it may have been aiming at the wrong target for all I know, but there's individual issues where I think we pretty much achieved what we set out to do. And there are ones like, there's an issue where, is it 17? Where the Titans, where the tether gets torn down by Vigilem, and the Titans are fighting each other, and Lightbright's in the Titan. Actually, that's another pair of characters I might want to save, because I love Lightbright and Lodestar, or Titan. But that, again, you could argue about whether what we were trying to achieve between the writing and the art was a good idea in the first place. But in terms of what we actually got in the issue and on the page, that was pretty much bang on what we were going for, sort of thing. And the same with issue 25 was the double-sized issue, where kind of everything gets a bit serious, and the Decepticons are kind of holding Optimus, and everyone comes to rescue him, and all that. Everything goes horribly wrong, and that pretty much came out, I think, as the best version that we could have done of that story and that issue in the time available. And Anna Malkova did 40 pages of amazing art for that issue, which really sort of sold the story. So there's quite a few like that where I think individual issues have worked really well.
Yeah, I think the War World arc are amazing. Another little question. We had Badiansky on previous and he had a problem, I could say the least, with Hasbro meddling with toys. Do you have that problem? We have to sell this toy. You have to include it in the...
No, honestly, I mean, I know I said before that you absolutely sign up for this stuff if you take on the job of writing the comics at this stage. You accept the possibility. But aside from sort of really quite gentle early on, it would be good if such and such characters appeared in the series. Since for almost all, I don't know, after the first 6 or 12 issues or something, every character in the series has more or less, with 1 or 2 exceptions, they're there because I chose to put them in there. And there's been negligible interference from that point of view. So no, it's really been quite painless in that sense. There have been 1 or 2 instances, like I said earlier, where I've wanted to do something with a character that, it just didn't feel like it was really going to happen. So kind of quietly swap characters or something. But, it's really nothing of any great significance from that point of view.
Yeah. Nice.
Good
Do you miss yourself having humans in the story?
No.
No.
If
humans are terrible. They're worse than Decepticons.
If you'd asked me that when I started, I would have said absolutely not. I'm actually much happier not having any humans in there. I've kind of matured or something since then, and nowadays actually, I can see the appeal of having humans, Transformers mixed up, sort of thing. So I'm not nearly as averse to it as I used to be.
Yeah, let's see how long the run will be. Maybe we'll hit Earth eventually.
You never know.
Yeah. The last thing is that usually we have a quote that is called Linda quote, but since you're our guest, I will leave my quote to you.
Yeah. I don't know how accurate. Okay, I can't remember how he says this either. So this might be a bit improvised.
Take your own interpretation. Go for it.
It's very simple, so it shouldn't be that difficult. I got better things to do than die tonight.
Yeah.
There's a particular... Yeah, go on.
I think it's Springer.
Yeah, it is Springer. Yeah. There's a particular reason I like it, because I didn't see the Transformers the movie until I honestly can't remember when I first saw it, but it was a long time after it had first come out. And I think it's a bonkers movie. I think there is so much about it that's just weird on so many levels, from the plotting to the sort of whole vibe of the thing, and the tone and the style and the music, and everything about it is just weird. And I actually really like it, but it's strange. But then you've got Springer delivering this line when he's whatever he's doing. I think he's loading a missile onto a launcher or something when he delivers it quite early in the movie.
Yeah.
And it's the most generic line that could have been, you could just cut and paste that line into any sort of 1980s or 1990s action movie. and it would just fit perfectly. And it's sitting there in the middle of this sort of deranged battle in Autobot City, in this really weird movie. So I always just found it very funny, just as a line sitting there in the middle of this movie.
Yeah.
I think the exact quote is, "I got better things to do tonight than die."
Yeah, that was pretty good. That was pretty good.
It's when he and RC gets in the hangar and just has to shuffle dead Autobots aside to attack the Decepticons.
Yeah. I remembered it was him and RC.
Yeah, I like the movie. It's so much colors.
Oh, it is. It's just mad. The whole thing is mad, and it's so. I don't know. I just think it's this really weird mix of sort of. I don't know. It feels like there's anime in there, and it feels like there's European heavy metal magazine type stuff in there, and these weird sort of 80s action movie grabs, and this just deranged plot that just goes from place to place almost at random half the time. Yeah. It's just this crazy, and killing your main character, obviously.
Yeah.
So I kind of love it just for the sort of crazy abandon with which they attacked the project.
Yeah. And the one-liners are just hailing.
Yeah.
I love it. When will we see you in Sweden, Brian?
Oh, I don't know. I do not know the answer to that. Do you know, I've never been to anywhere in Scandinavia, which is a terrible, terrible disappointment to us all, I'm sure.
We have Retcon, a Swedish convention here. You're always welcome there.
Oh, well, yes, I do. I like a little convention now and again, although it feels like an eternity since anyone was doing the things. But I assume they're all going to be back next year. But fingers crossed.
Yeah. We hope we get back to normal.
Yeah.
Or better than normal, I hope. But
a new normal.
That would be nice. But
yeah, it would.
Yeah.
It was
a pleasure having you on, Brian. Really nice talking to you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I hope you had fun.
Yes. No, that was fine. I hope I tend to over-elaborate some of my answers sometimes, but I hope I didn't talk too much.
No, you had the last chance here. Sell in the bold new era.
Exactly. Where can we reach you?
I'm not big on social media and stuff, to be honest, but I am on there. I'm on Twitter. Technically, I'm on Facebook, but I've successfully decoupled from that. So I am on Twitter. And I do have this podcast. My personal website has gone down, and I'm still debating what to do about that. But I do have a website for the podcast, the Nature Podcast, at thewildepisode.com. So I can be found there.
Awesome.
And don't forget Dinobot Slash and the Christmas special. Remember me.
I'm writing it down now.
Oh, great.
Gustav's wish list.
/ Christmas. That sounds like unpleasant fan fiction of some sort.
That can be really dark.
Yes. Okay. Got it.
It's going to be like Nightmare Before Christmas now.
We will keep in touch when it's closer to releasing this episode, Brian.
Okay, yeah.
And in the end, I always say, till all are one.
May your luster never dull and your wires never cross.
Very nice.
Oh.
Bye.